You don't need to be Nostradamus to get a grip on this year's NFL draft. This is RamView.
It's hot out there, so let's blow them off the line of scrimmage. Headline,
Live from the Ram Cave, I'm Joe Terosian, and this is RamView, the March 31st, 2023 edition, brought to you by Kistler Law Firm. Injured in an auto accident? Need help? Got questions? Call Kistler Law at 661-206-6990. That's Kistler Law at 206-6990. And check out KistlerLawFirm.com. That's Kistler Law Firm, one word, KistlerLawFirm.com. Kistler Law, they've been fighting for you since 92. And by Temple City Auto Repair. Having some auto issues? Get yourself some John and Henry at TempleCityAutoRepair.com. All right, we made it to the end of the week. It is March 31st. We are inside a month to the NFL draft, and things just seem to be falling more and more into place. They tell you it's not a rebuild, but yeah. If I was a season ticket holder, I would voice my opinion and say this feels like a rebuild with the Rams. Things have kind of settled down in the free agent market. There'll be a next wave of free agents after June, and they'll all be cheaper. So again, but right now, when you look at it, there's nothing out there for the Rams to really go after. So the next 3.5 weeks or so, it is all going to be about the NFL draft. And news is just keeps filtering around. You know, you see one player bounce all over. USC wide receiver Jordan Addison. I've seen him taken inside the top 10. I've seen him as low as 27. The receiver Quentin Johnson. I've seen him climb the ladder up into the top 10. I've seen Kalijah Kancey, the DT from Pittsburgh. I've seen him inside the top 10. I've seen him in the middle of the third round. And everybody is just guessing and all that stuff. And that's good. It's fun to speculate. But sometimes you have to take a look at what trends are. And that's why I say you don't need to be Nostradamus to get a grip on it. That doesn't mean you're going to know what's going to happen, but you can get an idea. So the Rams have met with Kalijah Kancey, Pittsburgh, defensive tackle, and they've also met with Osiris Torrance of Florida, a pure guard who plays 6'5" or 6'6", 300 spins. You know, he's the perfect size for a guy. You got to love him. But it's interesting when you start breaking both these guys down. I wouldn't mind a Kalijah Kancey if he is truly the guy. The Rams do have a love affair with Pittsburgh down linemen. In 1981, they drafted Greg Meisner, third round, 63 overall out of Pitt, and he had a nice little run with the Rams. They went very expensive and paid for Sean Gilbert, third overall out of Pittsburgh in 1992. And Gilbert had a good season with the Rams in 93. Later, he was traded and never really developed into that superstar player. He finished with less than 50 sacks in his career. And he suffered because he was with the Rams when the fire sale was going on and everything was getting geared to going to St. Louis. And then, of course, the Rams struck NFL Hall of Fame gold with Aaron Donald, 13th overall in 2014 out of Pittsburgh. And now Aaron Donald, you know, I like my linemen to be Bubba's, but Aaron Donald is the outlier. He plays at 6'1", 280. Seems horribly undersized, but we know how strong he is. We know how quick he is. Guess who is quick? Guess who runs about 6'1", 281? Kalijah Kancey, and that's why everyone's linking him with the Rams. At 36, I don't know where on the board he's going to land because I've seen him in the third round. I've seen him high in the first round. If he's there, maybe, yeah, I could see the Rams rolling the dice on him. I still would prefer edge, but I could see the Rams rolling the dice on him. And then, of course, the Rams have also met with Osiris Torrance, the Florida guard. Big dude, bad dude, 6'6", 6'5", 300 and whatever pounds, but he's not athletic. He's a brute. And so he's not a guy that you're going to swing to swing to tackle, he's going to be a guard. That's it, right? And I thought it was interesting that draft scouts and draft experts and people talking about the Rams are saying, oh, the Rams could take O'Cyrus Torrence at 36. We need linemen. Let's take a lineman at 36. I've shared some of this information before, but let's just look at drafting linemen in the Les Snead era. They've only drafted 5 offensive linemen inside the top 100 in the Les Snead era since 2012. Okay. One of them was Greg Robinson, number 2 overall in 2014. We all know how that turned out. You know, that bad stuff happens, right? You got to move on. But being that was an outlier and you thought maybe you were getting a generational tackle, what have the Rams consistently done forward? Well, they drafted Bobby Evans in 2019 at 97 overall, and forgive me for using the Evans name. They drafted Joseph Noteboom, 89 overall in 2018. These guys were tackles. They moved Bobby Evans to guard tackle. They tried everything with him. And then in 2015, they drafted Jamon Brown, played guard, 72 overall. Didn't really work out for him. He got released midseason in 2018. And then the highest draft pick outside of Greg Robinson, the outlier, is Rob Havenstein, and they scored on that, 57 overall. So the Rams, after the Greg Robinson pick at number 2, which where you think you're drafting a generational talent at tackle, and we whiffed, Snead whiffed, everybody would have whiffed on that one. The highest the Rams have ever spent a draft pick is 57 for Rob Havenstein in 2015. And so you could look at what the Rams are going to do and see what they need. And history tells you an O'Cyrus Torrence traditionally would not be the guy they would take at 36. I was looking at a CBS mock draft today, first 3 rounds, and they had the Rams taking an offensive tackle, Anton Harrison out of Oklahoma, 6'4", 315, taking him at 36. I just don't see it. I can't figure it out because there's no history to say the Rams would do that. The Rams have a track record when it comes to big uglies, and that is back half of the top 100 going even further back. I think once you get past Bobby Evans at 97, and again, forgive me for saying the name Bobby Evans, once you get past Bobby Evans, you got to go to Brian Allen at 111 overall to find the highest pick. That's just where the Rams draft these guys. So I wouldn't be surprised anything the Rams do, but I would be surprised if they took an offensive lineman at number 36. That would really be breaking their template. Could I see them taking a speed guy, a tight end, a wide receiver, running back? Yeah, it's the Rams, right? So Sean McVay wants more offense. We know they're in desperate need for an edge player, right? We know there's a need for a corner. We know they could probably use another running back. And so those are the things I think Rams fans should keep an eye on going forward. But at number 36, an offensive lineman, you just don't see it happen with the Rams. And you don't see the Rams drafting linebackers high either. And in that same CBS mock draft, it had the Rams taking Tulane linebacker Dorian Williams at number 69. Makes no sense. And then at number 77, the Rams taking Iowa State wide receiver Xavier Hutchinson. And Hutchinson's 6'2", 203. But, the Rams have already invested something like 17 rocks a year in a tall, strong wide receiver. And his name is, what's his name? Oh, yeah, Allen Robinson. And everyone's in love with last year's Nelson Spruce winner, Lance McCutcheon. Are the Rams really going to invest in another big guy with average speed? And from what the scouts are saying that I read on his report, average hands? I just don't think so. And so sometimes these mock drafts, I don't think people do their homework. I know that sounds bad, but it's true. I don't think they do their homework. And I understand if you're doing it for 32 NFL teams. So I do have some good news, though, before we go to commercial. Nathan Peterman re-signed with the Bears. And you're saying, why is it good news that Nathan Peterman re-signs with the Bears? Well, Nathan Peterman, as most people know, he's the wide receiver machine, the Rick Dockery of the NFL. it is really good that Nathan Peter re-signed with the Bears, because that means there's no chance in HE double hockey sticks that he signs with the Rams. And that's really good news, because you can understand why some guys like Chase Daniel or some other backup quarterbacks stick around for a long time. But honestly, if you have an argument where you don't think Colin Kaepernick's good enough to be an NFL quarterback, I think he's good enough to be an NFL quarterback. I just think the baggage and then just being okay is what keeps him out of the league. But if you're just going on talent alone, Nathan Peterman, man, that kills your argument that's saying that Colin Kaepernick's the worst quarterback that ever played. I mean, he's not great. It's his baggage that comes with that, not great. But Nathan Peterman, goodness gracious. How is he still in the NFL? I don't get it. I just don't get it. Okay. We're at commercial. All right. 10-minute mark. It's kind of the goal. I'm Joe Terozzi, and I was a sports writer for 21 years, and now I do RamView. And I also write books. Follow my name, Joe Terosian, JoeTorosian, and click it in on Amazon. You'll see my books. So I do RamView and I do books, and I do that to supplement my income. I pastor a small church in Burbank. You could also follow that small church on Burbank Faith Virtual. It's a channel right here on YouTube, as well as other media outlets, so to speak, social media outlets, Instagram, Twitter. We have our own website. In fact, we're launching a new website this week, so we're excited about that for Burbank Faith Virtual. And click on, and then, of course, like and subscribe here. That's what we do. And we want to thank our sponsors, Kistler Law, as well as Temple City Auto. Okay, we got our commercial in. Also, looking over my shoulder, you see a picture of the Ram book. I don't know if I got that in there completely. Maybe I can mess with this. There you go. It's the 1951 Ram season, the championship season, 1951 Los Angeles Rams. Great read. You should check it out. You could also purchase that on Amazon. Okay, so I think we're back in business. So little slow day in NFL. You know, do we want to keep talking about Zen Rodgers and Lamar Jackson? I mean, that's all that's kind of buzzing around right now. But let's look a little NFL history and then look at some Ram history, which is some really fascinating stuff. If you're an NFL fan for any time, if I say Zonka, Kick, and Warfield, you might say Miami Dolphins. But when you string Zonka, Kick, and Warfield together, you're likely going to remember something else, because it was on this day in 1974 that Larry Zonka, Jim Kick, and Paul Warfield signed future contracts with the Toronto Northmen of the World Football League, who later became the Toronto Southmen. These Dolphin players, Zonka, Kick, and Warfield, signed this in March of 74. They played the 74 season with the Dolphins, and then we're going to jump to the new league in 75. And of course, the new league halfway through 75 died. And these players all bounced around in different places. I think Jim Kick went to Denver. Zonka went to the Giants. Warfield went to the Browns. But Zonka, Kick, and Warfield was an earthquake when they were coming off of what? Back-to-back, 3 Super Bowl appearances, back-to-back Super Bowl titles. And Zonka, Kick, and Warfield signed with Toronto Northmen of the World Football League. And good for them, because the NFL was paying them garbage, and they got a little extra money. Also on this day in 1977, the San Francisco 49ers, in an insignificant move, signed former Warren Bear kicker, Warren High School out here in California. They signed Ray Wersching, who had spent 3 or 4 years with San Diego Chargers and was just an average kicker. But Wersching was the 49ers kicker from 77 through 87. He was money for 11 years for Bill Walsh's squad, and they signed him to a really no one knew, right? In fact, the 49ers signed Ray Wersching before Bill Walsh got there, and very much providence in terms of what worked out with Wersching and the 49ers. On this day in 1980, Roger Staubach officially retired, which if you know and you're a Ram fan, to your glee, Staubach ended his career on his butt at Texas Stadium, looking at at Bud Carson's 7 defensive back scheme at the end of the Rams playoff victory in Dallas, 21-19. Yeah, that was the Billy Waddy game, and the Rams ended ended Roger Staubach's career, just like in 78, they ended Fran Tarkenton's career. So those are good days for Ram fans that Staubach was retired on this day, March 31st, 1980. March 31st, 1983, this isn't an NFL story, but it's a story I like to bring up that reminds us of all the underside stuff of football. The Boston Breakers of the USFL brought up from their practice squad or their taxi squad a linebacker named Billy Don Jackson. If you're an area football fan, Billy Don Jackson played a couple years for UCLA in the late 70s, and it was later discovered that Billy Don Jackson was a functional illiterate, and somehow he got into UCLA. You wonder how those things happen, right? And there was all kinds of ridicule of him, and he went through a bad stretch. Drugs, he killed a drug dealer, did time for that. The nice back end of this story is, I haven't heard an update, but he came out of it all. He works on sets in Hollywood and has been married for double-digit years. So good news there for Billy Don Jackson, but he was a functional illiterate. And one of the things he said is that if he had made it to the NFL, and he was NFL talent, he said if he had made it to the NFL, that he probably would have ended up dead with that notoriety, that fame, and that kind of money. And so it's an interesting story when you read about Billy Don Jackson. It's probably a movie that needs to be made. It'll be interesting to see. On this date, March 31st, 1988, the Buccaneers, happy and fresh with the newly drafted Vinny Testaverde, traded Steve DeBerg to Kansas City for Mark Robinson and a 4th round and an 8th round draft pick. And DeBerg had a nice run in KC, took them to the playoffs, had a really great 1990 season, nearly engineered an upset in Miami in the first round of the playoffs. DeBerg is always fascinating because DeBerg lost his job in Frisco to Joe Montana, Hall of Famer. DeBerg lost his job in Denver to John Elway, Hall of Famer. DeBerg lost his job initially to Steve Young and then to Vinny Testaverde. Steve Young, Hall of Famer, Testaverde, quality NFL quarterback before going on to Kansas City. And I'm a big Steve DeBerg fan. My favorite Steve DeBerg memory is on Thanksgiving Day in 93. You call it the Leon Lett game. I call it the day Steve DeBerg was signed off the street and took the Miami Dolphins into a snow-filled Texas stadium and beat the Cowboys on one of the best Thanksgivings ever. So March 31st, 1988, Buccaneers trade Steve DeBerg to the Kansas City Chiefs. And on this day in 1997, and I bring this up because, again, it kind of goes with the Billy Don Jackson story. The Raiders send Darryl Hobbs. He was a wide receiver. Where was he? San Jose State? I don't know where he went. Oh, Pacific. I think he went to Pacific. He had a couple of nice years as a 3rd receiver for the Raiders. But the Raiders packaged Hobbs, a 1st, a 2nd, and a 4th to the Saints for the number 2 overall pick in the 97 draft. That was USC Trojan down lineman Darrell Russell. Heck of an athlete, 6'5", 325. And his career got off to a nice start with the Raiders, 28 sacks in 75 games. But he was busted up to 7 times and was suspended many times for drug violations. And then finally, at the age of 29, he died in an auto accident with former USC teammate Mike Bastianelli. And a real tragic story to Darrell Russell there. And again, just another sign that even when the Raiders maybe try to get it right, they just can't get it right. Brutal to be a Raider fan. On this day in Ram history in 2011, Andy Robustelli died. Andy Robustelli died at the age of 85, complications after surgery. He was a 6'1", 230 defensive end, and he spent his first 5 of 14 NFL seasons with the Rams, 1951 through 55. So he was on the championship team and the last team to make the playoffs before the George Allen era. And then he was traded to the Giants for Del Schaffner. He only missed 1 game in his career, and he was a 19th round draft pick, right, out of a place called Arnold College, 7-time Pro Bowl, 6 All-Pro teams. And he's a guy that it's a real interesting story with Andy Robustelli. Now, I'm going to take this RamView, and I'm going to embed it in a story on joetarosian.com. I did something it's called a thread. And if you look at what the Rams did when they traded Andy Robustelli to the Giants, the players they received back and then how they took those players, traded them for other players, and traded them for other players. There's a thread that literally connects Andy Robustelli from 1955 all the way to the drafting of Robustelli in 51, actually, that leads all the way to Flipper Anderson playing for the Rams in the early 90s. And it's a fascinating thing how you think one draft pick, one player traded can be turned around over and over again in future drafts. And it's a fascinating read. It's one of the favorite things I've ever done since covering the Rams. And you can check that out at joetarosian.com. Also on this day, March 31st, 1971, the Rams gave up on Tommy Mason. They traded Tommy Mason to the Redskins. Now, Tommy Mason's interesting because he was the first draft pick ever of the Minnesota Vikings in 1961, first overall out of Tulane, I think. And he was packaged to the Rams and sent to the Rams in 1967 for Marlon McKeever and the number 15 overall pick in 1967. So the Vikings got Marlon McKeever and the 15th overall pick in 1967 for running back who had already seen his best days. And Mason was just okay in 4 seasons with the Rams before being traded to the Redskins. And here's the funny story is, wow, how do you say this? The 15th overall pick in the 1967 draft that the Vikings got from the Rams was Alan Page, Hall of Famer. Now, if the Rams had drafted Alan Page, I guess he could have played along Merlin Olsen because Rosie Greer had retired. But they ran Roger Brown in there. They ran Dyron Talbert. They ran Coy Bacon in there. But the Rams were responsible for giving the Vikings of all teams, Alan Page. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. The Rams also got back from the Vikings the number 33rd overall pick, which they used for Willie Ellison, which is kind of cool. And a tight end who never played it down for them named Hank Bedsell. McKeever played 1 year with the Vikings and was converted from tight end to linebacker and got traded to the Redskins. So here's the thing about Marlon McKeever. Plays at USC, plays for the Rams, but George Allen's not really a big Marlon McKeever fan. So he trades him and Alan Page, essentially, to the Vikings, a Hall of Famer. Later, the Vikings trade Marlon McKeever to the Redskins for Paul Krause. And you know who makes the trade for Paul Krause? George Allen. George Allen makes the trade. The Vikings get Paul Krause. McKeever comes to the Redskins. Allen comes to the Redskins in 71. I blew this. Allen comes to the Redskins in 71, and then he trades McKeever back to the Rams. So Marlon McKeever, he's got Paul Krause, Alan Page, and George Allen doesn't like him. And he goes back to the Rams in 71. I just thought that was a really interesting thread. Tommy Mason goes to the Redskins for the 129th overall pick in the 73 draft, who becomes Cody Jones. You guys remember Cody Jones? Yeah. Cody Jones plays for the Rams through 1982. And he's in the Wendell Tyler trade to San Francisco. On this date in 92, Jerry Gray left the Rams, signed with the Houston Oilers. On this day in 1995, Chris Chandler left the Rams and signed with the Houston Oilers. A couple years later, he leads the Atlanta Falcons to the Super Bowl. On this day in 2014, Kenny Britt signed a 1-year contract and turned that into 3 full years with the Rams. Had his best season with the Rams, catching for 1,002 yards in 2016. But if that was the weakest 1,000 yards by a receiver I've ever seen, I am so glad Kenny Britt is no longer a Ram. He was originally a number 1 draft pick of the Tennessee Titans and Jeff Fisher. On this date in 2017, TJ McDonald signed a contract with the Miami Dolphins, 1 year, $775. Rams don't re-sign free safeties, right? Rams don't re-sign safeties, period. On this day, that same day, Case Keenum left the Rams and signed with the Vikings, 1 year, $2 rocks. And then on this day in 2020, the Rams didn't pick up the option on Nickel Roby-Coleman, and he signed with the Philadelphia Eagles for 1 year at 3 rocks and 1.3 rocks. And Nickel Roby-Coleman, as far as I'm concerned, he should have his name and number and likeness and image and whatever it takes because of what he did in New Orleans that got the Rams to the Super Bowl in 2018. I didn't see any pass interference. Ram news again, just a reminder, April 17th, players report, minicamp starts the 22nd, 23rd of May, 25th of May, all those OTAs, and then mandatory minicamp starts June 13th through the 15th. And Ashawn Robinson is still a free agent. Leonard Floyd is still a free agent. Traven Howard is still floating around out there, as is Jacob Harris. It would be interesting to see if the Rams could find a way to bring back Ashawn Robinson. I think it would be interesting to see if Leonard Floyd keeps floating around out there. If nobody wants him, the Rams could bring him back for a rock or two. That would be kind of nice, right? Latest mock draft I saw on PFF as we get towards the end of this. Latest mock draft here has the Rams taking Will McDonald, the fourth edge out of Iowa State. If Will McDonald, the fourth, can fall to the Rams at number 36, I think that's fantastic. I think that's great. And so it would be cool to see. I know everyone really loves Will McDonald. It's the first time I've seen him not in the first round. The same draft also, though, has the Rams taking a tackle, Jalen Duncan out of Maryland. He's 6'6", 306. Didn't have a great senior year, but I think he's had a great pro day. And his stock is trending upward. And if the Rams took an offensive lineman at 69, it would make sense. And so I don't know if Jalen Duncan's the guy, but at 69, it wouldn't surprise me to see them take an offensive lineman. And then the same draft really went off the rails. It showed the Rams taking Devon Aiken, a running back, Texas A&M, only 5'8", home run speed, which is great, but he's only 5'8". We've already got a small back in Kyrene Williams. I think the Rams really need is something in between, someone who can do a little more punishing, take some hits, and I'd like to see a little bit better back than that at number 77. If you can get him later in the fifth round, that's beautiful. Fifth round through seventh round, folks, is not a bad place to draft, right? It's like being at the end of the church potluck, okay? If you got some bubbas in front of you at a church potluck, it can be a little rough because by the time you get to the kitchen to load up your plate, all the good stuff is gone. But if you've been around church long enough, it's like you've been around football long enough, you know there's certain people who cook things that maybe aren't popular, but you know they taste really good. There's always someone that makes the really good cream of corn. There's always someone who makes the really good gravy, but maybe it's not in the right bowl and no one takes it because they load up on all the meat and stuff. And so I'm just saying that in the back of the draft, it is like the end of the potluck line at church. It's not optimum, but you know what? There's some still really good stuff left on the menu there. And you should be excited about the draft on the second and third day. Real quick, the Rams have met with Kancey, Torrance. We talked about that. Corey Trice, Payne Durham, Aiden O'Connell at Purdue, Adia Bawor at Northwestern. He's a DT. Schoonmaker, a tight end at Michigan. Again, they've met with Will McDonald before, and the mock draft showed the Rams drafting him. Pretty cool. MG Anderson, also a teammate of McDonald at Iowa State, DT. Carrington Valentine, cornerback, Kentucky. Tyler Scott, Trey Tucker, their wide receivers at Cincy. Abanikanda, I learned how to say his name, Israel Abanikanda out of Pitt. He would be an interesting draft pick for the Rams. Now, if they got him at 77, I don't know if I'd have a problem with that. And, of course, Julius Brents, Kansas State, combine interview, Senior Bowl. He's high on the charts for most Ram fans, and it should be. He would be a great pick at 69 or 70. So interesting stuff. Rams have 11 picks in the draft, and I think that is probably going to do it.
It was a stone groove, my man.
And as our effort is every day to do a bit of a stone groove, I apologize if I talk fast. I was just excited about the stuff. And be sure to check this out on joetarosian.com. You're going to see the link. You're going to see the story for Andy Robustelli. It's the thread of how Robustelli actually led to Flipper Anderson and all the players in between. It's a fun read. You can check that out on joetarosian.com. Be sure to hit like, leave comments, and just thank you so much for clicking on. It is a joy to be doing this. We want to thank our sponsors, Kistler Law, Temple City Auto, and whoever you may be out there. let us know. We'd love to talk Ram football with you. God bless. Take care. Have a great weekend.